Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening, our Southeast Asian friends. I welcome you all for today's e-conference on Chemical Industry Outlook 2022, organized by Indian Chemical News, India's most credible information portal for chemicals, petrochemicals, and energy sector. This is our first e-conference in this new year, so I welcome you all and wishing you all a happy new year 2022. Just a brief, the Indian chemical industry has a huge role to play to make India a US 5 trillion economy by contributing around US $300 billion to the GDP by 2025. The industry is growing with a CAGR of 9.3% and is expected to attract investments of rupees 8 lakh crore by 2025. Major players have focused on building capacity and expanding their reach into new and emerging markets. With this in background, let me introduce you to our esteemed speakers for today's e-conference. Mr. Maulik Patel, Chairman and Managing Director, Meghmani Fine Chem Limited. Maulik Patel is Chairman and Managing Director of Meghmani Fine Chem since 2017. He is actively leading and managing the Fine Chem division since the beginning of MFL. He has successfully steered the company into a dynamic organization by gradually building up a team of technocrats and engineers backed by an efficient administrative staff. He has expertise in expansion and new project installations, done MSc in Chemical Engineering from University of Southern California and MBA from Long Island University, USA. Mr. Vikram Shroff, he is joining or he has joined now. Vikram Shroff is part of the leadership team of UPL. Sir, are you joining from Dubai or from India?
I'm in Europe today.
Okay, so he has joined from Europe. He's part of the leadership team of UPL and has been driving continuous organizational growth with his dynamic leadership, sound strategic insights, and outstanding people management skills. Passionate about developing people, streamlining processes, innovation, and exploring new technologies for sustainable and resilient future. He has ensured business continuity and quick turnarounds through effective crisis management initiatives, and all these initiatives are really helping during COVID-19 time. A philanthropist to the core, Vikram takes keen interest in social development projects and the educational endeavor of Shroff family that benefits more than 5,600 students annually. This is a great achievement, sir. He believes in spreading the light of knowledge through innovative learning methods and leads a team that constantly strives for the same. We have Mr. B.K. Sethuram, Managing Director, India, and General Manager, CE, Next Polymer, Celanese. Belur Krishnamurthy Sethuram is the Managing Director for Celanese India, with responsibilities of charting a profitable growth path for Celanese in India. He and his team are committed to catalyzing usage of engineering plastics and specializing chemicals in a wide spectrum of end-use markets and working with customers to develop innovative solutions in emerging segments like 5G, advanced mobility, medical devices, and sustainability. He's a BTech in Chemical Engineering from IIT Madras, MS from Carleton University, USA, MBA from Sesson School of Business, a Kellogg-Wharton program. He is also a certified CEO coach from Coaching Foundation of India. Mr. Suresh Kalra, Managing Director and Head of RBU Asia, Huber Group. He is currently an executive leader at the German printing inks and chemical company, Huber Group, where he's leading the Asia and Africa regions, and is also the Managing Director of Huber Group India. Suresh is a mechanical engineer with MBA and loves adventure sports. He holds an open water driving license and has dived at various sites around the world. This is interesting, sir. Mr. Sai Krishna, Assistant Vice President and Sector Head, ICRA Limited. Sai Krishna has a work experience of 14 years, out of which he has been with ICRA Limited, a Moody's investor service company in the ratings division, for a period of around 11 years. He is also a member of ICRA's rating committee. He holds a BTech from UP Technical University and PGDM from IIM Kozhikode, and a chartered financial analyst chartered from CFA Institute, USA. He focuses on chemicals and port-related logistics, and I would request him to focus on the second part also, which is the port-related logistics, which is a big issue for this industry going forward. Next slide. The key discussion points are for today's e-conference is policy initiative to expedite growth of the industry, strengthening chemical infrastructure by developing chemical clusters, sustainable chemistry and circular economy, easy availability of raw materials, feedstock, and other related components, tackling logistics and supply chain challenges, creating R&D ecosystem, accelerating business transformation through digital technologies, adopting global best practices and customer-centric innovations. Next slide. Just wanted to brief you about the chemical industry outlook. This is the only print edition that we come up with. This is the second edition that we are launching in the month of March. And this is an exclusive collection of premium content for CXOs in chemical, petrochemical, and energy sector. The theme of this year edition is making India a global manufacturing hub. So we have the print edition. We also have the e-version and the microsite. And we are planning to cover chemical, petrochemical, and energy. The compendium will have the industry captain perspective, interviews from leaders in government, industry, academia, associations, and R&D organizations. And the key trends we plan to cover is green chemistry, sustainability, digitalization, technology, safety and security, supply chain, and logistics. On behalf of Indian Chemical News, I would like to invite you to participate and ensure your organization's presence in this exclusive collector's edition. Next slide. This year, we have a series of e-conference, presently we have announced the dates for two. On January 28, we are doing on sustainability, climate change, and carbon neutrality for chemical industry. And the day after budget, which is on February 2nd, we are doing the demystifying union budget for chemicals and petrochemical sector. With this brief introduction, now let me start the panel discussion. I would request delegates to keep posting their questions in the Q&A window during the course of the e-conference, so that we will take this Q&A at the end of the panel discussion. So each panelist will get around 12 to 13 minutes. And what we have done is we have divided into 3 rounds. So let me start with Mr. Maulik Patel, and let me understand, or let us understand from him, what are the policy initiatives that needs to be taken to expedite growth for the industry, for the chemical industry in 2022. So over to Mr. Maulik Patel.
Thank you, Praveen ji, and I'm thankful to the Indian Chemical News for giving me another opportunity and creating such a good platform to share our thoughts and to learn. Just the policy initiative topic, I would like to discuss about the 3 main topics. We have discussed again and again so many times in the past, but I would like to repeat with because budget is also coming nearby. So I would like to, I think in FTA agreements, which is a key, I think I would say the manufacturing company in India, people where the growing, the consumption story and the consumption is growing in India, people are focusing to set up a units because of the FTA agreements in Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam and other countries. So this is, I would say this is the biggest negative point to create a manufacturing infrastructure in India. So because of this FTA agreements, we are not able to create an entire value chain in the chemical industries, where currently the pharmaceuticals and the agrochemicals companies, still there are many raw materials that depends on the China and the other Western world, third world. So entire value chain is not become enough competitive to make it global success. Still we are domestic manufacturing for the domestic market only, because of this kind of FTA agreements government has signed in the past. And currently again I'm listening that the government is going to sign a UAE with the FTA agreement, with the UK government FTA agreement. So India has a population, in India has a consumption story, and India is next 5 years it is going to be the big boom the government is acting on the infrastructure side, then the consumption is there. If people wanted to invest, let FDI should come to India rather than signing a FTA agreement and they invest in other countries for the Indian market. So this is the big restrictions. I would say it is required for the country to encourage the manufacturing capability and entire value chain to bring in India as a global competitive, as a manufacturing hub in India. So this is the first point I would like to conclude. The second point, I would like to say that the PLI scheme government has announced. First of all, I would like to thank the government that, after COVID, the government has taken an initiative for the manufacturing promotion in India, which is more successful for the pharmaceutical companies, where the key molecule and KSM, which is supposed to be imported, they've announced a PLI scheme first, a PLI scheme for the pharmaceutical industries. Then subsequently, they've announced for the automobile, then again for the pharmaceutical second line, then automobile, then semiconductor. But the chemicals and the specialty chemicals still they have not announced. So that is also, it is required. And I think I'm sure the government is working on this policy. This is going to be the big boost for the manufacturing in the entire value chain, to increase the entire value chain in the chemistry and in the chemical companies. Because as I said, agrochemical companies, the consumption is growing in India, the pharmaceutical companies, and because of China Plus One strategy in last 5 years, the specialty companies are growing in India. At the same time, still the raw materials we are depend on the third world. We are getting an opportunity, but still not as a complete value chain. To increase and successfully to complete the value chain, I think we should encourage more and more to the PLI schemes in the chemical and the specialty chemical segments in the coming time. And the third point is energy is the backbone of any chemical industry. So energy cost in India is very high right now. So to focus, government is working on solar and wind energy, but still, energy for the chemical companies, they require energy 24/7. So it is not a good model. Either you invest in the solar or you invest in the windmill. But government has recently come up with a very nice policy, which is called hybrid policy, hybrid energy setup, which is solar and wind together, which increase the efficiency and increase the output as a total, both combined. And definitely the Tamil Nadu and the Rajasthan government has acted very well. But still, some of the states, some of the DISCOMs, everybody in the country, they are working in isolation for this kind of policy. So if government is acting, this kind of policy has to be unified and one nation policy, then definitely we can act, and in the manufacturing sector, definitely we can be competitive more in the coming times, because energy is going to be a big problem right now. Everybody is suffering because of the coal price increase and also the gas price increase. And many gas-based chemicals is unviable based on the recent gas price increase. So hybrid energy is going to be the success in the future. So government should think as a one national policy compared to individual. Every state has a different systems and different policy. So in the policy sector, yes, Praveenji, I would like to end here. So you can take it forward from here.
Thanks, Maulikji. You stressed on FTA, PLI, and energy. There is a lot of buzz on the PLI scheme for chemical and specialty. I hope in the recent budget announcement, we might see some of these. We are hopeful. The industry is hopeful. Let's see. Our next speaker is Mr. Vikram Shroff, joining all the way from Europe. And sir, being a global provider of sustainable agricultural products and solutions with annual revenue exceeding $5 billion, how do you see the policy initiatives that will expedite growth in the chemical industry in 2022? So over to Mr. Vikram Shroff.
Lovely. Hi. Nice to meet all of you, and thank you for inviting me. So I think the challenge in India, if we look at it from a global competitive point of view, is first we need to have a clear land pricing. Our land costs are very, very high compared to other places. And we are competing with real estate and residential for buying industrial land. That puts us firstly in a strategic backstep. Second, let's look at feedstock and other infrastructure. I think there's very, very important emphasis has to be there. When we look at competing countries, we find that other countries give a lot of basic infrastructure at a far advanced stage than what we get here. Let's talk next about the chemical clusters. I think government is already working on cluster development, but more emphasis should be there, and our clusters or industrial areas need to be far, far larger than what they are right now. We need to think about global scales of China, Vietnam, Germany, or even the United States. Lastly, I think the R&D collaboration in India has started. We have premier institutes, IITs, IIMs, UDCT, etc., etc. I think that we need to fund these institutes a lot more. If you look at the amount of money we Indians spend on sending our children overseas, it is the biggest drain of foreign exchange, or one of the biggest drains of foreign exchange, is us sending our children abroad to study. If the government looks at that and has a 5-year comprehensive strategy of uplifting our education institutes, not only will we save money, but we will come with global technologies that are in-house. And lastly, I think we need to be very careful about brand India. I think we need to look at our environmental compliance, we need to look at our safety, and overall improve the image of brand India, because as there is a China plus one, India has a fair shot at really, really growing internationally. But if we are not very conscientious, and if the government and industry don't work in a collaborative way of creating an ecosystem of very systematically improving the Indian manufacturing sector. So that's it for now for me, and I'll talk later when required.
Thank you, Vikramji. Now I come to Mr. BK Sethuram, Managing Director, India, and General Manager, C, Next Polymer Celanese. And they come from differentiated chemistry solutions and specialty materials. So my first question to him would be, sir, how do you look at the demand creation through government and industry initiatives, which will help the industry to grow from whatever they are looking at 10% or around 10% growth in years to come? So over to Mr. BK Sethuram.
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. I'm a big believer and proponent that of creating demand, right? I think when demand gets created, everything else kind of flows to it. Opportunity is created. We have a very strong entrepreneurial DNA in the country, and people will go there and do what is needed to meet that demand. It's happened time and again. So if I take engineering plastics or chemicals, many of the chemicals, you don't have world scale demand in India. So that limits people from putting up world scale plants. And today, if you don't put up a world scale plant, you can't really compete. So when you take that, let me take engineering plastics as an example. What can be done and what is being done already in order to drive behavior, just as an example, right? The PLI schemes that Maulik talked about are very critical. There's a lot of auto industry PLI has been announced. Big, important semiconductor PLI has been announced. That'll take time, but it's a good step in the right direction. Similarly, in electronics, and more recently in the advanced cell chemistries for batteries for EVs, which has got 10 shortlisted candidates. So I think this is going to drive demand. Now, the other elements to look at is about 50,000 crores of plastic components are imported into India. And similarly, there's a very large potential. We have a very small share of export markets of precision components and engineering plastic components. How do you enable that? I think it's important to have policies in place that encourage these kind of import substitutions. PLIs are one, but there's a whole need for world scale infrastructure, like Mr. Vikram Shroff mentioned about how can you create something at scale? How can you create large clusters where people can operate not as medium, small scale industries, which are also important, don't get me wrong, but also operate really large scale plants that can service markets. Let me take two examples, which are real opportunities that is there in front of the country today, which we can tap. One, I think, is EV vehicles and two-wheelers. China has an EV two-wheeler market, but they're all typically the smaller scooters. I think we have an opportunity to become leaders in that space. And a lot of India is, I think, the largest two-wheeler manufacturing country today. A lot of established players, people who export from here. Leveraging that, creating a whole infrastructure to meet that market, I think is one. space that has a huge opportunity. And the government should continue to provide a lot of incentives for that, and not just importing battery elements and other elements, but motors, but create an infrastructure that will enable the Olas of the world and everybody else to produce them locally, right? All the way going up to battery cells and separators. The other part is electronics. I'm glad that semiconductors have been done, but now you need to bridge the gap. There's a whole value chain sitting in Taiwan, Korea, China, and today we have just assembling mobile phones and electronics. So there's a lot of opportunity to incentivize that bridge between, as semiconductors come up, chips come in, producing components in between, so that, because that will provide scale, right? We are probably the world's number 1 or 2 electronic consumer today, but not necessarily a producer. So these are some of the things that came to mind for me, Praveen.
Thank you, sir, for your opening remarks. Let me come to Suresh Kalra, and Managing Director, Head of RBU Asia, Uber Group. And sir, we are looking at US $300 billion by 2025. Keeping that into view, I wanted to understand from you, how do we attract talent? Because there will be a talent shortage moving forward. So keeping that into view, how do we attract talent in the chemical industry to meet the targets of the future? So over to Mr. Suresh Kalra.
Lovely question, Praveenji. Thank you. Let's start with the very basic, which you already shared, but I would just like to talk where we stand today in terms of size. So we are the 3rd largest consumer of polymers as a country. We are 4th largest producers of agrochemicals. We are 6th largest producers of chemicals with some 80,000 products. It seems pretty big, but it still is like 3.4% plus minus here and there of the global requirement of chemicals. So where we are standing today and where we ought to go to is possibly much higher than 300 billion. We are at about 178 billion in 2019. So with a CAGR of what, 8-9%, etc. If we reach to 300 billion, should be the target in the new situation for us. This was right when it was 2018 and 19. We are talking about these CAGR growths. Situation is completely different after COVID hit us. Now, COVID, in India, we always been very optimistic. We see it as a big opportunity also to do things differently than what we have done in the past. So I would say rather if we see again in another numbers, we are about 14th largest in exports and about 8th largest in imports. Now that's the biggest gap we have. We have 8th in importing and 14th in exporting. There's a huge gap what we can fulfill, and that has to be bigger than 300 billion in 2025. So I don't know the numbers right now, but I can say that the opportunity should be much bigger than going to 300 billion in 2025. But for that, and that's where aptly your question comes, is we have enough talent for us in India as on the whole and as an industry for chemical industry or related industry in chemicals. Now we all know currently is not that the case. I don't see today the millennials or the Gen Z population, chemical engineering or chemistry, or nobody would ever tell you to go to school or college and you ask somebody what you want to be, or maybe in the school itself, nobody will tell you I want to be a chemical engineer, or nobody will tell you I want to develop a new molecule when I grow up, etc., and things like that. Everybody would like to go to a new age technology company, FaceTime, Facebooks of the world, or the Googles of the world, or maybe other related new gen industry which is coming. So this is going to be a huge challenge. So we have an opportunity to be bigger than 300 billion. I am again stressing on it without a number in my mind, but the opportunity should be bigger than 300 billion in 2025. But then the most important thing for that, and again, everything is important, our infrastructure, and we're going to talk a lot. We heard Maulik, we heard Vikram, we heard Mr. Seto. I think there are many infrastructure related requirements for sure, etc. But at the same time, the major requirement we would need would be the right people in the job who really want to make their career in this industry. Now for that, it's not easy. I do not have a solution. I can only say that right now what we're doing is not something the best to attract talent. We have a huge issue, not only of the age in this industry. We have pretty much middle-aged and above people who would be, when you look at this industry, The gender diversity is possibly one of the worst in our industry, I would say. So you do not get new ideas, you do not get new people. We will not reach where we want to be. Couple of good changes happening, I think, in this context. And I read it in ICN first, other than some of my friends told me. So we have, like, for example, Clariant India has hired their latest managing director. Is a very bright female managing director, Dr. Achha, I guess that's what her name is. So it's changing, but I think we need to make more changes in this. And how can we do that? One, we need to be more flexible in our industry. We are pretty much hard brick and mortar industry, where we still have everybody entering in the company with a thumb, and we are still maintaining that old style of I would say leading people. We need to change that once the new generations will be coming. We need to make it more attractive and glamorous. We possibly also need to stop talking a lot of our own language, and I'm one of them. Worked in the chemical industry all my life, and now in printing solution industry, which is also backward integrated into chemicals. We continue to talk about acronyms which outside industry people might not understand. Like if I use an example, if my son who came to training in my own company, as in my previous organization, and when I started giving him introduction, I told him we make trimethyl cyclohexanols and PMCOLs and PMCOLs, and he was least interested in that. And then I started explaining to him, no, it's a sunblock agent. When you go out in the sun, that you use this, and we make that sunblock agent. So we use a lot of language which is different and which goes within our industry. So to summarize it, and I can go on and on, but to summarize it, we need to change the way we have been thinking in attracting talent so far, which is traditional style. The brick and mortar is changing. The work from home and a hybrid environment is definitely coming, and we need to possibly stick to it even post-COVID. And third, we need to find more way to make our language more palatable when we are talking to the new generation, and attract talent at a very early stage and tell them how they can make their great career in this industry. So no great solutions right now, but I think it is more problems, but we all need to think it together. Possibly that's one of the reasons we all are talking today. So I'll stop here. And
one supplementary, Sureshji, to you. So are we looking at upwards of 300 billion, and what would be the revision numbers that you feel?
I would think it would be much bigger. Why I'm saying this is, I think in today's discussion, this is going to come for sure. These numbers were 2018-19. With COVID, we know, and I'm sure this is going to be another topic, and other speakers will be talking about that too. This was when we were talking India as a domestic growth only. Today, we are looking at India as a mother plant for many industries, and I think we are one of the examples. In Uber, currently, we are looking at India, we are already, and we are looking India as a mother plant for our global supply chain organization. Now, that's not what we were thinking a couple of years back, and that's going to change the trend. If it is the trend in the industry, it's going to change drastically. So I don't have a number. I'm only saying between 178 to 300 was a CAGR of 8-9%, which we were thinking in 2018-19. But with COVID and with China Plus One strategy and complete and China Plus One strategy very, very seriously taken across the industry, specifically around the world, I think these numbers have to be redefined. I do not know what it is, but it has to be pretty much north of what we're talking about.
So that's good food for thought for the Indian Chemical Council whenever they come up with the new numbers, which they would be doing very soon in this new year. Thank you, Sureshji. Now I come to Sai Krishna, Assistant Vice President and Core Sector Head, ICRA. One small question, and then I will come back to you. How do the rating agency look at the different chemical verticals, whether it is agro, whether it is specialty, whether it is chloralkali? So how do you look at those? And then what are the policy initiatives which needs to be done this year, so that, as Maulik Bhai said, that people or companies should not look at other destinations like Vietnam, Malaysia, or Southeast Asian countries?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Praveenji, and good afternoon, everyone. So with regards to the first point, how the rating agency looks at chemical sector for the rating process. So we try to look at the chemical products that a company is manufacturing and whether it is coming into the commodity category or is it a specialty product. And then we try to understand the market dynamics, if, especially for the commodity chemicals, what kind of supply demand dynamics are there, and what kind of whether any trade protection metrics are available for the sector. The demand is driven by which all end customer segment, what kind, and for the specific company that we are rating, what kind of end customer diversification is there, what is their exposure to cyclicality, whether they have any backward integration to and have a superior cost structure compared to the other companies in the similar sector. So these are some of the business risks that we look at when it comes to commodity chemicals. When it comes to specialty chemicals, we look at what kind of market share they have in those specific segments, and whether they have any sustainable advantage. We also look at what kind of profit margin sustainability they have shown, whether actually the products which they claim are specialized in nature are really specialized, and did they have superior profit margins in the past several years and lower volatility. And we of course look at what kind of product pipeline they have, what kind of R&D investments they are making, and what kind of demand prospects will be there going forward for that specific sector. And apart from that, for both the sectors, we'll look at the financial risk profile, what kind of leverage is there, what kind of capex plans are there, and going forward, over the next couple of years, what will be the trajectory in terms of their credit risk profile. So this is broadly the approach towards rating of the specialty and the commodity chemical sector. Of course, there will be company-specific issues which we'll be looking at for each companies. With regards to the policy initiatives, the points have already been covered by many of the speakers. But broadly, in the near term, what we are looking at is we are already seeing that in the last couple of years, especially since the COVID has happened, when it comes to, say, trade protection metrics or anti-dumping duty, wherever possible, government has continued with that. So these kind of trade protection measures will help the industry in withstanding the volatility and also encourage more capacity buildup. Duty rationalization and misuse of FTAs which had happened, some of the rules which have been brought in to avoid the misuse of FTA. And of course, the continued rationalization of duty structure is something we look at. PLI scheme, I'm sure everyone is looking forward for PLI scheme already, as per our discussion with the industry also, and even as per the news, since March 21 itself, we have been hearing that at some point of time, some PLI scheme will be introduced, and it has not yet happened, but we are hopeful that probably in the budget, that point will be covered. Extension of the export incentives for chemical sector, that will also be a positive thing if it happens in the budget. And these are some things which are near term, and the longer term factors will obviously be the cluster based development, improvement in the logistics, and also for the R&D, if some sort of incentives are given, and to encourage collaboration between the industry and academia. These are some things which we look out for on the policy front.
Thank you, Mr. Sai Krishna. Now I go to the second round, and I start with you, Mr. Sai Krishna. Since you also cover port and logistics, and logistics is coming out as a bigger problem for all the industries, not only for the chemical and petrochemical, but across the sectors. So how do we tackle this part? Because this is becoming a nightmare for everybody. So your views on that, and also the supply chain challenges which needs to be taken care.
Yeah. So when we look at logistics, we can look at two. One is the logistical issues which were there even pre-COVID. So in terms of infrastructure issues, connectivity issues, high dependence on road infrastructure, lack of rail connectivity, and also at the ports, high turnaround time. These were some of the issues which has been plaguing the sector, not only with regards to chemicals, but also other sectors over quite some time. Having said that, if we look at the last 5 to 6 years and the developments which have happened, many of these issues are currently in the process of being addressed, mainly because of the infrastructure development that is happening, the digitalization initiatives which are being undertaken at the ports under Sagarmala project and other projects. Already, if you look at the dwell time, what it was there 10 years back, there has been significant improvement, although there is still, a long way to go. But the trajectory is there where we are seeing that the turnaround times have improved. The draft issues which were there at many of the ports through regular dredging and all, they are being addressed. And within the port also, whatever congestion issues were there, through better planning, better infrastructure, and also all the digitalization and automation initiatives which are being implemented, we are seeing that benefits are flowing in. So, and going forward, what we are going to see is, with all the shift towards more multimodal logistics, aided by the infrastructure development in the form of dedicated freight corridor, which is being developed, and which will soon, in the next 1 or 2 years, will gain traction. And also within the ports, also all the initiatives that are being implemented under Sagarmala, as they achieve a scale, we will see that there will be significant improvement in terms of connectivity, shift from road to modes like railways and coastal shipping, etc., which will also help in transport of bulk chemicals, and at the same time, issues which were there with regards to safety, pilferage, etc., will also come down. So this is a work in progress which is happening, and we expect that going forward things will improve further. And in connection with that, the other factors which are there, like the cluster-based development, etc. So the cluster-based development, wherever the clusters are being developed, the idea is that they will also be in proximity to either a railway siding, or will be on the industrial corridors, which will also be covered by the dedicated freight corridor, etc. So over time, because of these kind of connectivity improvement, whether through the national highways or through DFC, etc., we will see that there will be significant improvement in transport safety as well as transportation turnaround time. So this is what will happen in the medium term. Now, another logistical issue which everyone is facing currently is because of COVID. Post the COVID, whenever the supply chain disruption has happened, there have been, especially in China, so immediately there's a cascading effect in terms of either container availability, increase in freight cost, etc. So these are some of the challenges which in the near term will sustain, and this will in fact will be indirectly beneficial for the sector in terms of both accelerating the China Plus One diversification which is being sought by the MNCs, because and also this will also encourage more to have some reduced dependence on imported feedstock and intermediates also, because this is something which you will always remain exposed. And again, if with the recent Omicron outbreak, when China suddenly imposed very stringent containment measures and quarantine rules for seafarers, immediately there has been a cascading effect at US ports, at European ports, and in China itself. And this is something which India at its level cannot help unless it becomes more self-dependent. So both the infrastructure improvement on the logistics front, which already has been happening, there more traction should be there. And at the same time, the focus on Atmanirbhar and Make in India and reduce dependence on imported feedstock and more value addition domestically, that should also continue. That will prevent, reduce us to exposure of these kind of global supply chain fluctuations.
Thank you, Mr. Sai Krishna, for your views. Now I would request Mr. Vikram Shroff, if he can throw light on how do we strengthen the chemical infrastructure by developing chemical clusters. So yours is a global company, and you would have seen many of those challenges which you would have overcome in different countries. And that's the reason you have been able to achieve such a big revenue number for your company. So how can India benefit from this, and from the cluster approach, and what are the best practices that needs to be followed? They are taking steps, but they now have to take quantum steps going forward.
Yeah, thank you. I think very good question. The global chemical business is about $5 trillion, and the 5 trillion operates mainly around China at 1.1 or 1.2 trillion, Japan at about 800 billion, Germany at about a similar number, and US, again, close to the 800 billion number. Now, if we look at India, we need to take steps to be a $800 billion, a trillion-dollar chemical producer. Whether we like it or not, as our GDP rises, we are going to be consuming chemicals. Chemicals are consumed in everyday life, whether it's the glasses that you wear or the suit that has a lining in it or the color that's on your tie. It's not only about chemicals people perceive as paint is also a chemical. So that's point number one. The government and policymakers need to realize that this industry is going to be the backbone of every other industry. Second point I just want to make, that every point rise in the GDP of a country, the rise of the chemical industry has to be much more, because without a robust chemical industry, we cannot substitute or hold any kind of a economic strength. Now, today we are looking at land. Land, I think, is one of the biggest challenges. Second, the ports, the speed of the port, and third, cost of power, which I think is now coming under control or is good. And lastly is labor and other local infrastructure. So all this needs to be done in a comprehensive manner. We need to allocate thousands and thousands of acres. Presently, the vision of most policymakers, most corporates in India was, oh, 50 acres is good, 100 acres is good, 400 acres is good. Today, to have any global scale plant that can compete, we need at least a couple of thousand acres to make that particular plant for any one chemical globally competitive. Second, all the feedstock, all the other raw materials also need to come from the same local area. So unless we are looking at thousands of acres of land together that is allocated by the government, given proper infrastructure, small towns around to house your employees, and road and a port close by, and having different modes of transportation, rail siding, I think that we will lose out. If you see after the COVID pandemic, if you see what Indonesia did to attract a lot of the Chinese investment, the Prime Minister's office in that country was involved, and they allocated thousands of acres to the likes of Samsung and others to move their battery and mobile phone plants. That was done in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. They were given everything on a platter. So we need to think more bigger, and we need to think everything in global scale. We cannot think in the license Raj mentality or in the small scale that we were thinking. Thank you.
And sir, how do you club it along with the brand India? Because all the things that you talked about, how will it help brand India move forward?
No, I think brand India is doing very well. I think that, but again, when you look at our size or scale in the global scheme, we are tiny. While we are even doubling and we think we're doing a great job, if you look at us compared to even Japan, or compare us even to a country like Switzerland. Switzerland does more chemical exports than us. So what are we talking about, right? We are doing a good job, but we really need to think, what is Germany doing? What is US doing? What is Korea doing? Let's look at even South Korea. I mean, of course, South Korea is far ahead, but just see the size of the country and how in the last 30 years, they've been able to really build global capacity. And it started from a chemical base. All these companies that we hear of now, which are consumer facing, they all started with the chemical base. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now I come back to Suresh Kalra-ji. And if you can talk about adopting the global best practices. So what would be the global best practices which needs to be, some of them was talked by Vikram Shroff-ji. So adding to it, if you can add few points there.
Yeah, very interesting. It goes very well with what Mr. Shroff has just said. And I was so very happy when he was saying that. I felt exactly the same thought. So now we got the number, Praveen-ji. He already gave us about 0.8 to 1 trillion is the number we should be looking at, not 300 billion. So I'm happy we got at least some number in our minds. But yes, earlier I talked about talent, but again, yes, everything starts with infrastructure. Till the time we do not have the economies of scale, and I think let's go with the global best practices question which you said. the whole world, the bigger chemical economies of the world definitely have one of the best infrastructures. It goes without saying. And Mr. Shroff just mentioned a couple of countries. And while I was saying, I just picked one book, and this is Taiwan. Now, this is the whole chemical industry of Taiwan, and it is mind-boggling even with the size of that country. I mean, forget about all other bigger economies which we're talking about. They all have those special economic zones, all the chemical complexes, where everything is interlinked together, and you don't have to go from one place to another. You don't need to have, I call them bullets, the special vehicles which you need when you are taking propylene from one plant to another. We were buying propylene in the previous organization, and I was always worried when it was on the road all the day. Every now and then, it's like every single day we have 5-6 bullets of propylene going and coming to us. Even today, ethylene oxide, which is also considered one of the most difficult raw materials to handle, it goes on the road, surface transport, it's not very viable. So we need to have these big, huge chemical plants where we stop counting the acreage of those plants, and everything is together, one next to another. That's the global best practices where people have been successful. We need economies of scale. We need also, it connects very well with another discussion which we might be having further more on, is of circular economy, where the waste of one plant goes as a raw material to another plant, and it can only be possible when they are next to each other, when they are in the same complex. So these are the global best practices we already have. So we don't need to really reinvent the wheel here. We just see how they were successful, and we possibly need to do and then better. The problem with India has been that I'll not say problem, possibly that's how you grow step by step. We have been very frugal in our approach, where we go step by step. If anybody has to start a new plant, they'll say, okay, let's start this with one reactor, we'll start producing, and then we put the other one. But it doesn't work in the long run that way, because then you have patches all around your supply chain within your own plant, and it becomes very difficult to conduct the safe operations. That comes to the second best practices, which we definitely need to look at, is how safety can be the most paramount thing for the chemical industry. Only one thing which can stop us from doing bigger than what we plan to go to the level of $1 trillion or even close to that. The only thing which can stop us in that regard is that we do not have a safe operations. In chemical industry, possibly this is one of the most important thing, and we need to really learn from the global best practices rather than trying to have, again, I would say use the word reinventing the wheel. We all know what are the best practices globally. We can do better than that. We can use all LOPA techniques or layers of protection analysis better than the world, etc. But at least to start with where everybody else is already doing. So these are the global best practices I would think we really need to work upon to reach to that level of $1 trillion chemical economy. So I'll stop here, because this is a topic we can go on and on.
Thank you, Suresh Kalraji. Now I come to BK Sethuramji, and I would request him if he can throw some light on sustainable chemistry and circular economy in 2022.
Yeah, thanks, Praveen. So, I mean, there's absolutely no question about the importance of this as we move ahead, right? I think it is something we owe to ourselves, to our next generations, without question. And how do we do it is the question. How do we balance the need to develop and bring a whole set of people who are still below poverty line and yet be able to go sustainably? And I think these are, one can have, there's a lot of evidence that shows that they go together. They don't need to be this or that. And as we work towards that, a lot is happening in the industry today, but it's happening in pockets. I think there's a lot of work being done on safe transportation. And for me, sustainability is broader than just, carbon emissions, right? It's about living in together with our society. So safe transportation, I believe, is an important thing. A lot of it is happening. ICC is doing some really good work in the chemical industry along with its partners, but we need to do a lot more on that front. There's stuff in investment in renewables and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I'd like to look at three things and maybe use, plastics and packaging and all of that as examples. Policy and regulations, I think, need to become really have to come into this in a more appropriate but yet aggressive manner, right? So if you have a lot of the regulations today are being put in, but they're not necessarily thinking about all the implications of that. So bringing in a holistic set of implications that will allow sustainability to happen is important. An example could be the scrappage policy for cars that's coming in. I think it's a policy that's going to help the environment in many different ways by bringing in more energy efficient and emission efficient cars and vehicles into the system. But then how do you set up an incentive for people to do what you do with those scrap cars? Now, there's a huge opportunity to take those materials, put them back effectively into the economy, into the system, and do that. So today, the whole recycling business is managed, I'm sorry, by a lot of rack pickers and small organizations. How can we build scale recycling operations that use technology and yet take care of these people who go and pick up things on the street? So I would say policy and regulations, and then somehow you make it attractive for people to invest in these kind of facilities. I visited a facility in Hyderabad that's got an app which connects 25,000 of these small setups through whom they source their materials. And they've got a really nice facility that converts scrap bottles into products that then go back into FMCG companies. So you're really taking out a whole set of, you're supporting infrastructure, you're supporting people, but you're also taking out a complete carbon footprint of manufacturing a polymer from scratch, right? How do you do this not in the small bits and pieces that's happening today, but make it happen at scale? And I think government plays a role in this, but also I believe that entrepreneurs should look at this as an opportunity and take that step and invest in it. I think I see increasing funds who support sustainability, increasing number of investors who would want to invest in sustainable funds, sustainable investable opportunities. The third part is technologies and appropriate technologies for these kind of recycling materials. And that again is something that needs companies to invest in R&D. A company like ours, we invest a good amount of portions into recycling technologies. Similar to that, as Mr. Shroff mentioned, how can there be universities, incubation centers that allow these kind of technologies to develop that are appropriate for converting scrap materials into proper prime goods that can be used like to replace materials. So really policy regulations, how to make it attractive for investment, and then appropriate technologies. I think these are required for sustainability.
Thank you, sir. Now I come to Maulik Bhai. And sir, you are working in a cluster in Dahej. But how do we strengthen these clusters with respect to raw materials, feedstock, and other related components? And because definitely the kind of pace that you are growing, you will need more space for the manufacturing capacities that you are thinking of. So how this can be planned in a better way moving ahead? So over to Maulik Bhai. Sir, if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, let me.
Before Maulik Bhai speaks, I would request, I'm seeing a lot of questions in the chat window. So I request all my delegates, please type in your questions in the Q&A window so that it becomes easy for us rather than toggling between Q&A and chat. Thank you. Over to Maulik Bhai.
Yeah. So, Indian government has started a PCPR complex concept, 10, 15 years ago. But out of that, I think the two PCPR region, which is one is in Dahej and another is in Vizag. Two is, I think it is most successful in terms of the infrastructure. If you see after 20 years, the land price has gone up, as Mr. Vikram has said, the land price is going to be a crucial thing. So I just wanted to take you that in 2006, the price of the land in the PCPR, the PCPR region was around 300 rupees a square meter. And in today's time, the land price is not available. First of all, the land for the new people, if they wanted to come and invest in a bigger land parcel, is not available. And if they wanted to available in the resale, it is costing around 2,500 to 3,000 rupees. So at this price, if you create a big infrastructure, big like 1,000-acre kind of things, which you wanted to develop, which makes itself it's unfeasible. So how such kind of PCPR we can create in a much faster way? I think that is the way to think, because it takes a lot of time to acquisition of the land for the governments. If they cannot think now, so we will be out of the land in coming times. And probably even if we have an opportunity, we have a demand in India, the way the demand is growing, but I don't think so we are able to, create an infrastructure or create a chemical industry for the basic chemical, bulk chemical, or anything. Another thing is, propylene and ethylene. Lot of chemistry which is based on propylene and ethylene. But most of the, this kind of infrastructure, if it is available, like from the government companies like IOC or ONGC, if propylene and ethylene, because it requires a huge capex, and that kind of propylene and ethylene is available, then the downstream chemical can consume and they can create a much better value chain for the downstream specialty chemicals. So that kind of cluster approach we do not have. Whoever is, coming with propylene and ethylene, even government units, they have wanted to think converting everything to the polypropylene and polyethylene eventually. So that's why we are scarce right now. As of now, if you see the PVC demand is, 1.5 million we are producing and 1.5 we are importing. And that growth is happening in double digit. And still nobody is thinking to setting up a PVC plant in a large scale in India, at least. So this kind of scarcity is coming in coming times, even though we have a huge demand, the growth is happening. As I completely agree with Mr. Sethuraman has said that, we don't have an economy of scale as of now. But, I just wanted to give you an example. In 2010, we started a chloroalkali plant. That time we wanted to think what is the best way to consume chlorine, because ethylene was not available. We can't think about PVC. So we thought about what is a possibility. Then we thought about epichlorohydrin. So that time the epichlorohydrin demand in itself in India was only 20 KTA. So the size of the plant, which is not feasible to set up an epichlorohydrin plant. But in 2018, again, we relook it, and that the consumption has gone up to 75 KTA. And the economy of size of scale is availability is 50 KTA. So we have set up and we are going to commission in next month. So the demand is growing in India. So as Mr. Sethuraman has said, the engineering polymers, economy of scale is completely different. But I think not today, but probably in 2 or 3 years time, definitely the opportunity will come and people will set up a unit in India if the raw materials and the feedstock are available. And that kind of infrastructure only can government units can able to do it, because this is a huge investment. And same, if like propylene and okay, another way is, many Chinese manufacturing companies, they have set up a propane dehydrogenation plant. So if in India, the size is not available, but, government can support in a one PCPR region kind of thing, this kind of infrastructure where they can bring propane and dehydrogenation unit they can set up. We can completely knock out the import requirement of propylene from that kind of unit, So these are the things we can look at it, and we can create a huge downstream chemicals, and we can create a complete value chain out of it, and where it makes India in a global platform competitive. Another thing is, gas. So there are a lot of gas-based chemistry which is in India, which is unviable. Glass is manufactured from the gas. Okay, so glass cannot be transported. So definitely the glass industry is developing based on the gas. But a lot of gas-based chemistry, like a lot of chemicals, it is not available in India. So people cannot think about it. They have to only depend on the import. But many countries, they have a different gas policy for the feedstock in the country. So that kind of bifurcation we do not have, so I think if the government can think in this line, we can reduce the gas-based chemistry, completely from this. So that is one of the angle. I think it is very important for the future gas-based chemistry. Another is, port infrastructure. Port infrastructure, as I mentioned, the PCPR region, when it started focusing, we are getting just a land from the PCPR region. Other infrastructures takes a lot of time in India. So we don't have a ready PCPR or plug and play kind of infrastructure available from the first day. But even after, I can give you the 15 years, after 15 years also, the Concur has not set up a ICD. They're thinking to set up a ICD in Dahej. So In China, if you see in every states, they have a many PCPR region kind of in clusters they have. Even in Germany, they have a many chemical clusters they have even in that country. So in India is as a country, we can develop only the two successful PCPR region, which is in Dahej and Vizag. So in coming times, if government can think and focus well before, because it takes a lot of time in India to create an infrastructure. So if we will not think right now, I think that is going to be the major constraint in coming time.
So Maulik bhai, if I have understood you correctly, if the plug and play kind of a PCPIR and the PLI, if these two things are being taken care, I believe we will definitely have quantum jumps moving ahead. And I was just the recent announcement by Reliance. They are looking at a land in Kutch of 4.5 lakh acres. So the economies of scale that we are talking about, they are thinking in those lines of 4.5 lakh acres for the EV part, for the solar panel part, and all the things related to that economy, which is the new technologies which are coming up. So if that kind of land capacities are not being designed or developed in terms with respect to PCPIR or PLI, definitely we will be left behind. And I think that's an excellent example of what is the land requirement for industries in the chemical and petrochemical sector that we require. So few words on that, Maulik ji.
So, in Gujarat, that is, see, Reliance is a different scale together, so definitely Reliance can create such kind of infrastructure by their own, what they have created in Jamnagar. But the all other size of the company, like mid size and the mid and above size of companies, around 5,000 crore kind of companies, they require all feedstock infrastructure and other infrastructure. It is ready made. If they would like to spend on this kind of infrastructure at this scale, I don't think so that any industry or any chemical manufacturing out of this by creating their own infrastructure will be feasible. So it is a completely different game altogether, I would say. You can't compare. The Reliance is a different game altogether. So we are, all other industries, if you compare, it's a completely different, size, where they can create such kind of infrastructure like Jamnagar. If they wanted to repeat, they can create it. But to create a Jamnagar kind of infrastructure for other size of the company is completely different. It makes any chemical unviable. I would say in today's time, the way the infrastructure cost is growing, in last 10, 15 years, I would say the manpower cost, the water cost, or the land cost, it makes, if you think anything small or mid, one of the biggest thing, many policymakers, when they're creating PCPI region, they're creating a space for small and mid. But today's time, the small and mid in the Dahej kind of infrastructure, it is very difficult to survive, where the infrastructure cost is growing, the all utility cost is growing. So so it is making unfeasible in certain size of the company to create their own infrastructure by their own. I would like to give an example. Any PCPI region, like in Germany, or in China, they don't set up their boiler units, for the steam requirement. It is coming from the common infrastructure. It is ready-made available from the first day. Here we are creating a boiler for each and every unit separately, and that requires annual shutdown. So if you put all together 10 days of each and every industry, how much efficiency we are losing as an industry. So it is just one small example, but there are many such kind of examples. We are losing efficiency by creating your own infrastructure where government is not giving, or somebody is not focusing on one particular infrastructure.
Thank you, Maulik ji. Now we come to the third track, and we will start with you. And we still have 25 minutes to go. So we will try to complete this round in another 10 minutes, and then take up the Q&A. I see around 15 questions on the Q&A window, and on the chat window, there are 46 comments. So to start with you, the global best practices, you talked about some, and taking the thread away from whatever you discussed. So little bit of hand-holding is definitely required. And if that is being taken care, I think we can move ahead quicker, faster, and it will also strengthen the chemical industry. So with global best practices, your views, Maulik ji.
That's from the global best practices, everybody, I think Mr. Vikram has said, Mr. Sethuraman has said that so R&D tie-up with, small and mid-scale companies, they cannot create their own R&D. So if they have in China, if you see each small or mid-sized company, they have a tie-up with their university or their professor of working who is in the university. Same like in US. So that is really a big, I would say, in terms of to improvement towards the efficiency, that is a big weakness we have. If we can create somehow this by incentives or by government supports or forcefully, something on the CSR kind of activity, you can include this part, or then it is going to be a big change in coming times for the small and mid-scale industries in the chemical sector. I would consider this. And in terms of the global best practices, if you see the technology, if you can bring best technology to India, if like, again, I would say the FTA kind of thing which is creating a restriction to coming a best technology to India. How China has grown in last 20 years, all the technology has gone there. People have started copying it, make it at a global scale, increase the capacity. That's how they learn the technology. So same thing, India is not able to do it by doing FTA. So best technology is not coming to India. So, but I would say the technology, when it comes, you bring a good technology from like epichlorhydrin. I would like to give an example. When we are getting a technology from France, which is very well successfully done, and we learn a lot of new things by getting that technology. Not only the technology for particular chemical, but how they operate, how they give a training to the people, how minimum people can operate the this size of the plant. That kind of technology, we always keep a higher manpower in India for one particular job in one shift. But that efficiency in Europe and even in China is improved in last 5 years. So how we can reduce the manpower and operate the same kind of efficiency. That's how we learn from the different part, getting a different technology and getting a training from a different country. So that's it. Yeah.
Thanks, Maulik ji. I come back to Mr. Sethuram ji. And if you can talk about creating that R&D ecosystem.
I want to take a cue from what Maulik said, right? For us to become strong, we'll have to have that very strong R&D setup to be done here. I mean, the things like fostering risk taking, encouraging risk taking within the company. A lot of let's go back to specialty chemicals, right? There's a very good specialty chemical company network in India. Now, how are they going to go to the next level from producing chemicals that are generic replacements of something that's available and actually going from lower value to higher value products? How do you go into solution-based things rather than just providing the molecules? A very important part of that is actually investing, in my view, in customer insights. Are you really out, for example, if you're mostly exporting your products, do you have people in your export markets sitting there listening to what your customers have to say and what the next best thing that they need? Or are you just saying, okay, an innovator has produced this, I'm just going to produce another molecule that works like that? I think that is an investment that somebody needs to make. So that's one of the things that comes to mind, right? The other thing is an example I'll take, which is working from what I hear pretty well, but took years to set up an enormous amount of work and led by Professor Anand from IIT Madras, is the incubation center in IIT Madras. I mean, we should be having, as Maulik said, probably 30 of these in the country, but there are a handful of them. But they are very good setups. The model there is you go and you can invest in or set up your R&D within that facility and do your work. But then in order to be in that facility, you have to perforce get a certain number of points by interacting with academia. Today, I think, and this is, I'm not casting aspersions on academia, but just that the interactions between academia and industry is not so high. So the solutions available in academia or the expertise available there is not really translating to business. But this perforce makes you work with them. You have to hire or have so many interns, so many MTech students. if you use facilities, you get so many points. If you hire a professor to help you with the problem you have, you get so many points. And I think this encourages, forces interactions to happen. And it will not happen overnight, but start now. And in 5 years, 10 years, you will have these centers churning out very, very good technologies that are appropriate for India, that will allow it. And this need not be big companies, right? They support, I mean, Saint-Gobain, I understand, has 100,000 square feet of space, but there's also smaller companies. I think Aether started there and is now on its own feet. So it can work from small to big companies, but there's so much to be learned and leveraged from these relationships. I think we can do more and more on those fronts. So I think there's just a couple of examples. But I think open innovation is going to be necessary as technologies start. You cannot have, you need multidisciplinary technologies to grow.
Thank you, Sethuramji. I would now request Suresh Kalraji if you can throw light on sustainable chemistry and circular economy, keeping in view new technologies which are coming up like EV, hydrogen, and green chemistry.
Okay, so thank you. Before going to that, if you allow me, I just want to comment on what Maulikji has mentioned on FTAs. Just a view which I still want to put in, because so FTAs, I know, Maulikji, where you're coming from and how it is maybe harming some of the industry. At the same time, I would say, although we want India to be the most successful, but it's still a connected global world. When we say that we want to create a gap, currently we have more imports than exports, and we want to do it other way around. FTAs would be beneficial to us also. It's a double-edged thing, whether it's a small or it's a benefit, but it's a double-edged thing. There are still so many raw materials around the world which are being made, and we buy. If we don't buy them, like in pharma, all the key starting materials coming from other countries, if you don't buy them cheaper due to FTA, then possibly you are still not competitive. So I understand what you're saying, but it has to be seen from the point of view where we all get benefit and when we don't. It should be chosen very carefully where you want, which countries you want to have. Like I said, in Uber Group, we are looking forward for the mother plant for the global world. Now, if I have to supply to Southeast Asia and I have to be competitive in Malaysia and Thailand, FTA helps me rather than other way around. So it's both ways, but need to be looked at carefully. But I thought I was going to make that comment. Going to maybe to your question on the sustainability, circular economy, I think we already talked about it. I would say there are, again, it also is connected with the best practices, globally already done. So for example, TFS, known as Together for Sustainability, which is also linked with the EcoVadis certification around the world, is one of the certifications where they look at environmental, its ethics, and how you treat your labor, or the entire supply chain, all non-financial instruments, and they look at it, they audit you, and they provide you the silver or the gold certification, etc., which saves a lot of time when the vendor management is happening. Now, these are something which has already been tried and tested. It's already there for the last 10 years, and I've worked in organizations where we were working on that. We got certifications for that, and it really helped. Similarly, in the ink industry, we work on a cradle-to-cradle certification. We are pretty strong in cradle-to-cradle in a lot of products which we produce, and we also have certifications for that, which is also part of the circular economy. So these are all tried and tested mechanisms which are working pretty well, and it has to be robust by every passing day and by every passing year. And we in India need to adopt these certifications or practices to the extent we can, and then see if we need to do even better than what they are doing. Coming into other all aspects, EV, hydrogen, or clean hydrogen, as we say, that's one of the major discussions happening all around the world today. And I think India is still not reached there, but I guess there are certain announcements at a prime minister level already happened for the national hydrogen mission, which they have launched. There are at least 5 big companies in India who are committed to it, including Reliance, NTPC, and I guess Indian Oil Corporation, etc. There are 5 large corporations which are already committed to that. And I think one of the biggest investments, again, coming from the Reliance on that side, they're going to be producing one of the biggest electrolyzers in the world, not in the world, but at least to that scale, which is equivalent to the size of electrolyzers required for these kind of projects. So these are few things which are actually happening, but they're still at pretty initial stages in India. And that's why I'm saying it has to be linked very well. There are certain things globally being done, and we need to learn from that and make it better at our end. Coming back again to Mr. Sethuram's comment on the new products. We might need new molecules to be developed here, but at the same time, what possibly we need is what is the vitality index we have in our country today, which possibly not always with new molecules, but it's a new, all the businesses which are doing what has happened in the last 5 years of new innovations, whether it is processes, it's just an extension of the product lines which you're already doing globally and now you start doing in India. So it's all linked, but going back to the very basic, that there has been a lot of things which are already going on in this world, both in sustainability, in circular economy, in innovation, in the new product development, etc. And we need to take it from there, what is done, make it better, or make it what is more usable to us in India, put our infrastructure in this, put our new talent in this, and then lead the way for the next way for us. So that's what my thought would be on all these aspects.
So very, very beautifully put, sir. Now I request Vikram Shroffji, if you can talk about R&D and with respect to sustainability moving forward. So over to Vikram Shroffji.
Thank you. So I think a very good point, just to share with everybody that UPL is rated a global leader in sustainability. We are ranked #1 in our sector in the chemical industry. So an Indian company is ranked higher than all multinationals and anyone else on sustainability by Dow Jones, by Sustainalytics, and by FTSE. So this is a very prestigious thing. Second, we've set up a University of Sustainable Technologies in India to help spread this, because earlier we all discussed that, brand India, the ecosystem has to grow together. And the next thing that we've done is we've also set up a Center of Excellence for Safety with Gexcon from Norway, which again, I think will help the whole Indian economy ecosystem improve. Now, when we talk about sustainability and global practices, please realize that while these were seen as huge expenses and investments, today we get preferred lending because of our high ESG rating, far cheaper loans. So these things now that we did out of the goodness of our heart and a vision for a better world, today are rewarding us financially by giving us money cheaper. So this is a very positive thing for other industry members to learn in India and do. And I feel that the stock market, global investors, and our final consumers across the world will start rewarding us or punishing us based on our global sustainability initiatives. So those are a few of my thoughts on best practice. Now, R&D. Today, R&D collaboration technologies are becoming easily available. Indian scientists, Indian technocrats. Again, UPL is #1 in patents for any Indian company. So agrochemical and a specialty chemical company in India has more patents than any other companies. Our R&D budget is close to about 5,000 crores. So these things can be built in India at scale by an Indian company that was a very small company 20 years ago. And our scientists in India are top end. Our innovation is top end. And rightly, as Mr. Sethuraman said, whether it's the IITs or the other institutes, we have amazing professors and we need to engage ourselves, and each industry should actually start absorbing or sponsoring a couple of colleges. I think that will be a great thing. So those are a few of my thoughts. Thank you.
So we need to emulate a lot of the best practices as UPL has done. And I think Vikram Shroff sir has already elaborated in the best possible way. Invest more on the R&D part, and the kind of investments that he is putting in, I don't see many chemical companies in India doing the same. Definitely all these bear fruits, and they also got a 700 million loan at a very cheap rate because of the sustainability part, which he mentioned during the course of his speech.
1.5 billion. Let me just correct. It was 1.5 billion. 700
billion. Yeah. Thank you, sir, for updating my data. Now with this overall background, we are at around 4:20. So another 10-15 minutes for Q&A. So last word with Sai Krishna, and then we will open it up for Q&A. So please type in your questions in the Q&A window. So over to Mr. Sai Krishna.
Yeah, Mr. Praveen. So I think many of the points with regards to sustainability has been covered by the esteemed speakers. From a rating agency point of view, I mean, we are also looking at the ESG risks as important criteria, and the importance of the same going forward is only going to increase. So the way we look at it for the chemical sector is what kind of the regulatory trajectory is definitely going to become more stringent. So with regards to the product portfolio, what kind of risks are there? Whether there could be any risk of product restriction if in the segments in which the company is operating, whether the regulatory compliance requirement is going to increase over time, and as against the compliance requirement, what kind of options the company has, the region in which it is operating, whether there could be any social risk arising from protests or other issues because of a remedial action that is required, and what kind of impact they will have on the companies going forward with regards to higher operating cost or higher compliance cost. These are some of the things that we look at this stage, and are going forward, the directionally we expect that the regulations are going to become more stringent. Companies which make a proactive move and shift towards more sustainable products and solutions will definitely benefit. And here one point that I would like to make is under the China plus one other diversification opportunities that we talk about. While it's a significant opportunity, there is also a risk that some of the companies might try to pick up only low-hanging fruits, and some of the sectors which China is deliberately closing because of environmental concerns or issues. If only those entities or products production of such entities move to India, then it will not be a sustainable sustainable factor for the Indian industry, because going down the line, if not now, maybe 5 years down the line in India also, the regulations will become more stringent. Then again, those products or those companies will face issues with regards to higher costs or closure. So while we have to benefit from the opportunity should also keep in mind the sustainability and the long-term regulations that are required. And this is something which both the industry and the government should look at. And with regards to the MSME sector also, like some people had already covered, I mean, government should also encourage them with regards to compliance adoption, and probably provide some training programs to the employees so that they are able to meet the requirements. And also with regards to whether it is Indian REACH kind of regulations or other regulations, also labeling, etc. This could be more simplified so that even the MSME sector can adopt, and over time they become more formalized, and this will help them in achieving the opportunity that is coming from the export market. Otherwise, they will end up remaining at the lower end of the value chain. Yeah, so
Thank you. Thank you, Sai Krishna ji. Now we open it up for Q&A. I will try to extend it by another 10 minutes, if that's not a problem with you. We are at around 4:24. We will try to complete this session by 4:35 or 4:40 or so. The first question is from, there are three questions, two questions from Suvayan Guha Ray. So he's asking about the commercial success of biofuels from third generation algal biomass. If somebody would like to take this up. Commercial success of biofuels from third generation.
Yeah, Praveen, I don't know about algal biomass, but I can say that, like a lot of ethanol blending has started in Indian government, because they wanted to replace the import, they wanted to reduce it. The same way, Indonesia and Malaysia, Malaysian government, they have focused on the biodiesel part, and they wanted to reduce the import for their country, and they are focusing on the biodiesel part, the way like India is working on the ethanol. So if without the government support, this kind of activity will not be feasible. If government is planning to do it, then only it is possible to do it in a commercial way, because this all needs to have a support from the government, then only it is possible.
And then to add to whatever Maulik Bhai has said, presently we are at around 8 to 9% of blending that we do. We are looking at E20, which is a 20% blending going ahead. And presently it is through molasses and corn. And definitely if there is a business case with respect to algae-based biomass, the government will be eager to look at it also going forward. The second question is the success of the initiatives in green hydrogen, solar energy, harnessing, CapEx forms a big factor. How do you see the R&D and the targets attainments in this direction? I think the National Hydrogen Mission is a step in the right direction. There have been achievements on the fertilizer sector, the steel sector, and other sectors utilizing hydrogen. And there have been one announcement made by POSCO and Adani that they would be going for a steel plant where they are going to have hydrogen. If somebody wants to add on this, I would be happy to. So let's move forward. The third is from same Suvan Guhare. He's talking about electric vehicles, biofuel. So he's saying he's asking a pie chart on what would be the breakup of the transportation sector with respect to electric vehicle and biofuel. So Setu Ramji, I would request if you can give him a short answer.
I don't know if I can give a pie chart, but I can tell you what I think will be the sequence in which it will happen in India, right? More or less. I mean, I think you will see two-wheeler electrification happening quite quickly. There's lots of activity in that space, and I would imagine that in 3-4 years, there'll be a significant replacement of ICE engines with EV. Parallelly, there could be, subject to government support and push, the public transportation could move more quickly to EV space. I think the four-wheelers will then follow later and probably be 2024, 25, even though Tata Motors is making a huge investment. They are taking a lead in this, but I think eventually, if you want to talk about the base loads, 25 to 30, 35 will be when we'll start seeing traction there. And I think commercial vehicles will follow up later. Interestingly, there's a lot of support for hydrogen in commercial vehicles, hydrogen fuel and fuel cells. And that might actually go in that hydrogen-driven vehicles there for commercial might be the way to go. Yeah. Okay. But I'm sorry, I don't have a pie chart as such.
Thank you, sir. Viswajit Bose is talking about, this question is for Mr. Suresh Kalra. And the question is, what are the plans of Uber Group of business growth in the next 2 years and specific plan to maximize use of locally available raw materials?
Okay, lovely question. This is an easy one. So, sorry, who asked this question?
This question is from Viswajit Bose. So are you planning to maximize use of locally available raw materials?
Yes, Mr. Viswajit. So one thing is I'll give a quick introduction. I think I already said, but we are a printing ink company globally, but we are one of the ones which is basically backward integrated. So we make all the pigments. So in India, we are the second largest pigment manufacturer, but we use it for all our captive requirements. We make all the oligos and monomers, etc., and a lot of chemical intermediates in between, which is required for those printing inks. So primarily today, we are a printing ink company which is backward integrated in chemicals. Going forward, we look forward to be an equally chemical company which also serve the printing ink solution market. So we have a lot of plans for expansion into outside of printing ink industry as adjacent opportunities and also as white space opportunities. With this, to answer your question, yes, we look forward to buy almost as much as we can from India. We have a very complex buying today with about 900 different raw materials across, and we are buying globally, and it is a very, very complex situation. No Pareto rules applies to us. We are buying maximum as 5% as a single product instead of 80-20 ratio usually it should be. So we look forward as much as we can to buy locally from India, and that's one part of the major job I have. So if you have ever idea about how you can help us do localization, I'll be more than happy to meet you in person or write to me separately. Thank you for that.
The next question is from Yakesh Prajapati. There is a huge demand for acetic acid, methanol, and PVC, but still no world-scale investment are coming up. What's the reason? I think Maulik Bhai in his presentation talked about it. Any further additions are welcome, Maulik?
Yes, as I mentioned, there are on the natural gas, this acetic acid and the methanol both are driven by the acetic acid, or both are driven by the natural gas. And in India, the government has given a subsidy for the people who are making the fertilizers, for the farmers. But for the such kind of chemicals, there is no subsidized gas available as of now. So that is the reason why we are not able to compete the people who are manufacturing in Saudi Arabia or Iran or other part of the world where the gas price is very low. So that is the only reason, and it is going to continue if we don't do anything on the gas pricing policy for the chemicals.
There is a question. Thank you, Maulikji. There is a question. PLI scheme will be helpful in terms of additional production. What's the opinion of the panel? Vikram sir, if you can talk about the PLI scheme and its advantage for India.
I think any scheme is welcome. So, I mean, if any PLI scheme comes, we'll all get some incentive and money. So I don't think anyone will say no. I think in India, what we always learn is it's the details that always get us, right? So it should be realistically simple. Also, it needs to be of a global scale. A lot of the PLI schemes, I think, again, some of them are causing, in my opinion, a little bit of fragmentization. So they need to be local scale, but then there's always a challenge in executing that. But any scheme, and we must say that the government, the policymakers, environment ministry, other ministries are being very positive, and things are moving pretty fast. So there is in my opinion, a positive movement. That would be my answer.
Thank you, sir. Navjot Sani is talking about, do we need to have a strong association of chemical manufacturers, which strives to be an active participant in policy making process and holds frequent meetings with the government departments to discuss the challenges being faced by the industry in the ever-changing economic environment. I believe there are many industry associations who are working on this role, and they are meeting. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So, hello. So there is a question from Mr. Ghanshyam Patel. Serious action or steps taken by chemical industry to save energy as per BE guidelines to reduce energy cost factor in chemical industries in India. Vikram sir, if you can talk on this, how to, what you can say, reduce energy usage and cost.
So I think as technology evolves, I think there are a lot of things that companies can do. Process intensification, smaller reactors, in situ reaction. I think there's a whole new faculty and a whole new science around that. It's difficult to give a broad concept, but energy use efficiency is something that we can always improve. And I think all of us, whether it's just been the boiler efficiency or the pump efficiency or even the light bulb efficiency. So difficult to give a very specific view, but we've been able to save our energy footprint year on year by bringing in bioreactors and different kind of new technologies.
And another question to you, sir. This is from an anonymous attendee who doesn't want to divulge his name. Mr. Shroff is given a free hand. What 3 initiatives he will implement to achieve the desired growth for the Indian chemical industry? He wants you, for a time being.
I will take great ideas from our panel only, because I think it's a fantastic panel. So first, Maulik's idea of big land parcels, and then having common storage for key raw materials to come in. Second, different government pricing for different feedstock or raw material. I think that's very, very important. I think Mr. Sethuraman talked about the IIT Madras. I think really empowering our education institutes, and I talked about that, really giving them hundreds of crores. And again, I'm repeating the point, we are spending thousands of crores, sending our children abroad, and our colleges are tied up in some weird things where we are not allowed to charge higher fees, and there is no proper infrastructure. So if the government just takes a 5-year view, and if you just look at Australia, the amount they've been able to earn from Indians going there to study. So I think our education and R&D capability will go up by that. And lastly is port and infrastructure, which Sai Kiran and Sureshji talked about. I think those few points I would take as 100% overlap over what I'm thinking.
There is two questions, one from Ujjwal Vaishnav, and he's talking about what are your views on make versus buy for upstream chemicals, and this is for Maulik Bhai. Would we buy upstream chemicals and add value to the country, or invest in making the upstream materials and leave downstream? And Milton Panakal is talking about, he's talking about the PCPR, the plug and play model. One would be learning from EDB of Singapore, which developed Jurong Island with 3-digit number of companies where they complement each other, like what Mr. Maulik mentioned. So this is more of a comment. So he's talking more on, should we buy upstream chemicals and add value to the country? So over to Mr. Maulik Bhai. Sir, if you can unmute yourself.
So it's a good question. As a backward and forward integration, I think it is both very important factors to become a global competitive. So in India, I would like to just give an example. Sometimes you do a backward integration because you have no choice. I'll just give you an example. Indian chloroalkali industries, they cannot survive without the captive power plant, which is not the case in Europe, which is not the case in Japan, which is not the case in many countries, where there are so many power producers are available at a competitive rate, and you just bid it and they just supply the power. So which is not the case in India. So in India, the backward integration as a power plant, you have to survive to run your chloroalkali plant. So definitely as a chemical company, our focus is always to remain in the chemical sector because that is our core factor. We don't want to be a power plant manufacturer. So forcefully we have to do sometimes the backward integration. As a forward integration, yes, because if you see many companies 10 years ago, many pharma companies, they just focus on N-1, and they just do it the final. They just do a paperwork. They just get the US FDA, on the one step. But those kind of short, thinking, which is not competitive in today's time, where China has also learned very fast the US FDA approval. And now they are quoting N-1 steps much higher price than the finished goods. So makes Indian manufacturing company unviable. So as a sustainable model, as a global player, as a competitive global player, definitely the entire value chain is more important than remain only in the N-1 or N-2.
So let me take the last two questions. One from Anirban Das. This is for the startup part of it. How we can encourage startup ecosystem to invest in chemical sector, and I request Suresh Kalra ji to take care of that. And the last question is how can you ensure international consistent quality for small and medium sized enterprise? And I request Sai Krishna to answer that after Mr. Suresh Kalra. So over to Suresh Kalra.
Yeah, I'll take very briefly here. I guess we have very successful companies in India. We already have in our pen list some very successful entrepreneurs. I think they lead by example, so they might also be helping. I heard them already. So the startup ecosystem has to be supported by the already successful entrepreneurs in India who have already done great, and they can help both financially and with their own learnings how to be successful in this segment. The one small thing which I would also say is that in India we talked about talent, but we also need to understand that people who are lesser experienced but their willingness is great can do fantastic jobs. We don't always have to look at huge number of years of experiences to be successful, like the whole world has shown us. So this panel can definitely be helping those new ecosystems. So, thank you.
Sai ji, your comments.
Yeah, Praveen ji. So with regards to the issue of quality at MSME sector, what we have seen is that there are companies who try to adopt the best practices, and then there are companies who have limitations in terms of either access to sufficient trained manpower, or with regards to adoption, they would require some help. That help can be in the form of help from the government by having technical programs for the MSME sector, incentives for them to move towards a better compliance and meet the regulation requirements so that they can start supplying to global players. And also from the industry front, there could be support for the MSME sector, wherein the larger players or the global players who want to have a supply chain in which the MSMEs will also be integrated, to ensure that they get proper training, help them with compliance and registration, etc. And this is the way forward, wherein we'll see that there will be increasing formalization which will be happening. Currently, whatever in many of the sectors, 30-40% is with MSME sector. Gradually, we'll see that many of these entities will move up the value chain. And unless the support is there for the government and the industry towards the MSME sector, many of the potential opportunities to the full extent, it might not be able to achieve.
So a big hand to all my esteemed panelists for providing valuable insights, and also devoting time for all our delegates. We had around 497 odd registrations that we had. Out of that, 205 turned up. So let me thank Mr. Maulik Patel, CMD Meghmani Finechem Limited, Mr. Vikram Shroff, Director UPL Limited, Mr. BK Sethuram, MD India, and GMC Next Polymer Selenis, Mr. Suresh Kalra, MD and Head of RBU Asia, Uber Group, Mr. Sai Krishna, AVP and Sector Head, ICRA Limited. And I would like to request all my delegates to rank this e-conference on a scale of 1 to 5. And please type your, what we can say, scores on the chat window, in the chat window, 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest in the chat window. So please type in your scores so that at least we know where do we stand and what are the things that we need to improve upon. So majority is 5. There are only 3 4s. So that's a good score, and a big hand of clapping from all our delegates to all the speakers. I would like to thank all my delegates for making this e-conference interactive and lively. There are 62 comments in the chat window, 64 now. We were not able to take all the questions, and the LIC is still 26 were there in total. So once again, thanking you all on behalf of all ICN team members who at the back end made this session lively and interesting and informative. This is Praveen Prashant signing off to meet again on January 28, 2022 at 3 p.m. And the topic on January 28 at 3 p.m. would be sustainability, climate change, and carbon neutrality for chemical industry. Till then, stay safe, take care, and please tune in on 28th of January 2022. Once again, namaste from India, from Delhi, to all my panelists.